give you a taste of one of my courses, The Trial of Jesus. What's that? Well, I'll talk about that in just a minute. But let me also tell you that this course, The Trial of Jesus, always starts a conversation going. And I've had, through the years, some students actually tell me, a couple of students, I got a job because of it. How does that happen? Well, we've all gone on job interviews, and they're stilted, and they're not your regular conversations. And then each of these students told me, they went in, the interviewer had their transcript in front of them, in front of the interviewer, and the first words out of the mouth was, "What's this Trial of Jesus course?" And so they just had a regular conversation, and a job resulted. So let me first tell you the backstory to this Trial of Jesus course that I've been teaching now for 8 years. So here's the backstory. Years ago, I would teach a course, Jewish law. And you're saying, what's that? Well, Judaism isn't just a religion. It's also a legal system. In fact, it's the world's oldest continuously functioning legal system, which dates back to about 1400 BC. And just like we have laws that deal with criminal law and property and evidence, Jewish law also have laws that deal with criminal law and criminal procedure and inheritance and so on and so forth. And so when I would teach this course, Jewish law, there was a small section dealing with the trial of Jesus, a paragraph, that's it. And I thought the first time I would teach this, we'd spend 15 minutes on it or so. It didn't work out that way. We would spend hours and hours, driven by the students, not me. And so every year this was happening. A short paragraph where I thought we would spend 15 minutes, turns out we would spend 2, 4, 8 hours or more on this one paragraph. And one day my wife just told me, she blurted out while I was talking to her about this, "Why don't you just teach a course, The Trial of Jesus?" And so I said, wow, that's a great idea. So I went to Dean Garth, who was the dean of the law school at the time, a lovely man, and I told him, and he didn't hesitate. He said, absolutely do it. And so I did. And I love this course, and my students really love this course, because let me first tell you, this is diversity too. Diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity in scholarship. And I'm very proud to say, I could not teach this course in every law school in the United States, but I do here. And it's a tremendous course, and I will be frank, not because of me, but because of my students. And in that class, I always have a diverse student body. I have Jews, and I have Christians, and I have Buddhists, and I have Muslims, and I have atheists and agnostics. And all of them contribute in an incredible way to making this course a course that always sells out, and I always have a wait list for the course. And it's because of the students who approach it with intellect and curiosity and passion, but always respectful. No one has ever gotten their feelings hurt. And so it's not me, it's the students. And so maybe in a few years, because it's an elective, you'll be in the trial of Jesus. So with that brief intro, let me tell you why I teach this course. And I teach it because I love property, I love wills, I love all the courses I teach. But this course keeps me up at night. It really does. It really does. And it keeps me up at night because of this. If Jesus of Nazareth had been set free at any stage during the legal proceedings, and I understand those of you who are Christians say that couldn't happen, and I understand, but look at it, if not theologically, then philosophically. If Jesus of Nazareth had been set free at any stage of the legal proceedings against him, and he dies of old age, not on a cross, then there's no Christianity. Now you spin that out in a parallel universe. There's no Easter. There's no Christmas. There's no Toys R Us. And everyone today who is a Christian would almost certainly be a Jew. And instead of there being 15 million Jews in the world today, it's probably about 2 billion. And there wouldn't be a Crusades, and there wouldn't be a Reformation because there's no Christianity to reform. And there's no Holocaust. And I can't even begin to spin out all of the ramifications of this. But that's why I teach the course. It keeps me up at night thinking about these unthinkable things. So with that, let me now get into the trial of Jesus, a little taste of what we talk about in my class. And for those of you who have no background in it, and for this class as well as all my classes, I presume you have absolutely no background. So I can assure you, you may know nothing about the trial of Jesus and Jesus of Nazareth, but that will not interfere with your enjoyment of this. So let me give you some background before I actually get into the trial. Jesus of Nazareth is a teacher, a Jewish teacher in ancient Judea, and he's running into conflict with some other Jews. All of the characters in the story are Jews except for one, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. Everyone else is a Jew. Jesus is a Jew. The Pharisees, what's that? It was a branch of Judaism at the time who are opposed to Jesus. They're Jewish. And there's the priesthood. What's the priest? The priests ran the temple in Jerusalem at the time. They're in opposition to Jesus. Jesus doesn't like them. They don't like Jesus. And this all comes to a head. They want to, the Pharisees and the priests, they want to destroy Jesus. And so ultimately, the climax of the story is Jesus is arrested at the end of the Last Supper, which was the Passover meal, big Jewish holiday. And Jesus is brought before the high priest Caiaphas. And because Caiaphas and the others wanted to destroy Jesus, they brought witnesses to testify against him in this legal proceeding of sorts, which is why I could teach this. It's a school of law, not a school of theology, but it's a legal proceeding. And it's not getting anywhere. The witnesses are contradicting each other. And so Caiaphas, the high priest, decides to take the bull by the horns in a matter of speaking. And in a fit of frustration, you can almost sense the frustration with Caiaphas as he asks Jesus the ultimate question, and here it is. Are you the Christ, the Son of God? And Jesus responds, I am. And Caiaphas tears his robe in an act of horror and declares he has committed blasphemy. And the entire tribunal agrees he should be put to death, and they turn him over to Pontius Pilate, the ruthless Roman governor, and Jesus is ultimately crucified. So, this is a law school, as I say. We apply the law to the facts. In my Trial of Jesus class, we look at the Gospel of Matthew as a trial transcript, if you will, and as though we are appellate lawyers looking at this transcript. So let's apply the law to the facts. Are you the Christ, the Son of God? Let's go over that. What is this Christ stuff? What is it? When Caiaphas asks Jesus, are you the Christ? Well, Christ is Greek, Christos. In Hebrew, it's the Moshiach, the Messiah. What's that? In Judaism, the Messiah is the person, he's a person, a mere mortal, the person anointed by God. That's what it actually means, Moshiach, or Christ. Anointed one, the one anointed by God who's going to lead mankind into a golden age, an age where there's no war, no pestilence, no disease, a golden age for all of mankind. And so Caiaphas is asking Jesus, are you the Moshiach? Are you the one who's going to be leading mankind, not just the Jews, but all mankind into this golden age. And when Jesus says, I am, that gets Caiaphas agitated. Well, here's the problem with that, though. Judaism as a legal system has a lot of laws, just like we have laws, making sudden behavior criminal action that could be prosecuted, such as murder. Can't be a murderer in America, can't be a murderer under Jewish law. Can't be a kidnapper in America, can't be a kidnapper in Jewish law. Can't be a thief in America, can't be a thief in Jewish law. These are all crimes. Some of the crimes are capital crimes, punishable by death. Here's the problem, though. Claiming to be the Messiah has never been a crime in Judaism. In Jewish law, claiming to be the Messiah is, well, nothing. It's just not a crime. In Judaism, Jesus was not the first person to claim to be the Messiah. Before Jesus was born, there were people who claimed to be the Messiah. After Jesus was executed, there were people claiming to be the Messiah to this very age. In the latter part of the 20th century, in the mid to late 1990s, there was a Brooklyn rabbi who some people thought was the Messiah. In ancient times, going back to about 500 BC, some Jews thought, which is quite astounding, that Cyrus the Great may have been the Messiah. Who's Cyrus the Great? He was a great general, the leader of ancient Persia. And in 586 BC, the Babylonians conquered ancient Israel, destroyed the temple, and exiled all the Jews to Babylon, modern-day Iraq. 70 years later, Cyrus the Great defeats the Babylonians, and Cyrus was a very unusual king, because in ancient times, most kings were just horrible, 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 sadistic people. Cyrus the Great wasn't like that. Cyrus would not allow his soldiers to rape and pillage. Cyrus did not torture or execute captives at the end of a victorious war. And Cyrus especially took a very much of a liking to the Jews. And so after he conquered the Babylonians, he allowed the Jews to go back to their home in ancient Israel. Not only that, he gave them part of his treasury so that they could rebuild the temple that the Babylonians destroyed. And so some Jews said, maybe Cyrus is the Messiah. Never mind, the Messiah is supposed to be a Jew, and Cyrus wasn't a Jew. But my only point is this. Throughout history, people have claimed to be the Messiah, and nothing was made of it. The Jewish response typically is, well, let's wait and see. Cyrus probably came closer than anyone else from a Jewish perspective. So that's the first thing. So Jesus is being prosecuted for being the Messiah, but that's not even a crime in Judaism or in Jewish law. So let's now take the next element, if you will. Are you the Christ, the Son of God? Son of God. That's interesting, too. Here's why. In Judaism, the view of God is Unitarian. There's one God, not Trinitarian. And the term Son of God comes up from time to time in Jewish literature and writing. But when it does, it always means a righteous person. That's it. And the idea that Caiaphas was asking Jesus if he was the Son of God in a literal sense would make as much sense if any of us spoke today of, say, a four-sided triangle. There's no such thing. In Judaism, there's no such thing as the Son of God. There just is no such thing, except to the extent that the term means a righteous person. So let's go through what we have so far. So Caiaphas asks Jesus, are you the Christ, the Moshiach, the Messiah, which is not even a crime, and are you a righteous man? What? What's going on here? I'm not sure. But let's go a step further. Jesus then says, I am. And that seems to really do him in. Now, here's the problem with that. In Jewish law, Nothing that a defendant says can be used against him in a trial. Nothing, nothing, nothing. You all have heard about Miranda rights when a cop makes an arrest. He tells the arrestee, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent, right? And anything that you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Can and will be used against you in a court of law. Jewish law, which long predates American law, has, I guess we can call it, an absolute Miranda right. It can't be given up. In Jewish law, nothing that a criminal defendant says could be used against him. In fact, what's very interesting, in the case Arizona v. Miranda, from which we get the term the Miranda rights, the United States Supreme Court actually makes reference in that opinion to Jewish law, where the defendant has an absolute right against self-incrimination, a right so strong it cannot even be given up, it cannot be waived. And in another prominent Fifth Amendment case, which you'll read about when you take the course in criminal procedure, Garrity versus New Jersey, the United States Supreme Court actually addresses in great depth the Jewish law right against self-incrimination. In Jewish law, the crime has to be proved by at least two witnesses. So let's see what we have so far. So Jesus is being set up and convicted for claiming to be the Messiah, which is not a crime, a righteous man, the Son of God, because he admits to this. But as I've just said, nothing that a defendant says in Jewish law can be used against him. What's going on here? I'm not totally sure. But let's continue a little further. After Jesus says, I am, Caiaphas declares he has blasphemed. He is guilty of blasphemy. Really? Well, I think you see where this is heading. Yep, there's another problem with that. What's blasphemy in Jewish law? Well, in Jewish law, blasphemy is not just being disrespectful to God. The capital crime, and it is a capital crime, in Jewish law, blasphemy is uttering God's personal name while cursing God. That's from the book of Leviticus. What's that all about? What do you even mean? You're probably saying to yourself. I'll explain. In Jewish law, in Judaism, God actually has a personal name. You all have personal names. I do, you know, our names. In Judaism, God actually has a personal name, and it's made up of the Hebrew letters Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. And those letters, which are God's personal name, are so sacred. That name is so sacred, it's never, ever, ever pronounced. Jews, typically, when they refer to God, instead of using that name, which can never be pronounced, they use the name Hashem, which is Hebrew, literally, for the name. The name. Sometimes the name is referred to by scholars as the Tetragrammaton. The Tetragrammaton, tetra, four, the four-lettered name. In English, it's often translated, which is not the Hebrew, so I say it, Jehovah. That's God's personal name. And in Jewish law, to blaspheme requires that the defendant state the name and, in the same sentence, curse God using it. And so the Talmud, which is this ancient compendium, a massive compendium, 3 million words of Jewish law and debate and analysis, gives an example of what blasphemy is, substituting God's four-lettered name with the name Yossi, instead of God's personal name. And this is how the Talmud says, this is how someone would blaspheme. Someone would have to say, may Yossi strike Yossi. Well, Jesus, number one, doesn't even say the name. Two, he certainly doesn't curse God. That's inconceivable. So let's back up. So what do we have so far? So we have Jesus of Nazareth claiming to be the Messiah, not a crime, in every generation before Jesus, every generation since Jesus, someone has claimed to be the Messiah. Nothing's ever happened to them. Nothing. So claims to be the Messiah, admits to being a righteous person, the Son of God, admits to it. So in this legal proceeding, based upon what he says, he's guilty for the crime of blasphemy when he never blasphemes. And there's more. And I'll go a little more, and then I'll take any questions that you have, because that always makes it very intriguing. After Caiaphas says he has blasphemed, then the gospel relates that the entire tribunal agreed. Well, there's a problem with that too. What's the problem, you say? In Jewish law, if an entire tribunal votes for the defendant's death, capital case, the defendant is immediately set free. Why? Because there would be, and there's two different courts that would handle capital cases. There's the Lesser Sanhedrin, a court of 23, and the Great Sanhedrin, a court of 71. We don't have to get into the differences right now. It was probably, if there was a tribunal listening to this, it was probably the Lesser Sanhedrin, because they would hear most capital cases, they would hear a case of blasphemy. So in Jewish law, if the entire tribunal, 23 men, voted for death, then the defendant is immediately set free. Why would that be? Because in Jewish law, if not one judge would find something in favor of the defendant, then it's a rigged court. It's a kangaroo court. And the defendant will be immediately set free. So when the gospel says the entire tribunal voted in favor of death, well, then he should have been set free. So what's going on? One more thing, and then I'll take questions. Jesus' ascent to Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate. Who was he? He was a Roman governor. And what's interesting is in the Gospels, Pilate is portrayed as not such a bad guy. He doesn't want Jesus executed, in fact. What the Gospels don't say is how hideously sadistic Pilate was. Because we know from ancient history, from historians who wrote of Pilate outside the Gospels, he was very, very ruthless. How ruthless? 6 years after Jesus' death, he was actually recalled to Rome because he was too bloodthirsty, even by Roman standards. Now, let's remember the Romans gave us crucifixions, a horrible, horrible, horrible death. The Romans gave us the Colosseum with men fighting each other to the death for the entertainment of the Roman citizens. And so the emperor believed that Pilate was too bloodthirsty, even by those standards. And he was recalled to Rome about 6 years after Jesus' death, because he had massacred, he had ordered the massacre of a group of Samaritans, which is an offshoot of Judaism. And the Samaritans actually boldly went to Rome, got an audience with the emperor, complained to the emperor about Pilate, and with that, the emperor recalled Pilate back to Rome. We don't know what happened to him after that. After that, it's all legend. So my only point is, Pilate ultimately has the say of whether Jesus lives or dies. He was a very bloodthirsty man, and he was ordered to keep the peace in Judea, because at this time, we know from ancient historians in the gospel itself, there were already uprisings. And so, in Jewish law and Judaism, there's one thing that I didn't tell you, which makes Pilate's interest in this very significant. In Judaism, the Messiah would not just be this great teacher that would lead mankind into this golden age, but he would also be a great general. That's the Messiah in Judaism. A great general who would free ancient Judea from foreign subjugation, because Rome had conquered Judea. And Jesus was not the first one the Romans thought to be this great leader. It's interesting to think of Jesus as a military leader. You read the Gospels, you say there's something that's not in sync here, and I understand that. But as I said, there have been many Jews, many messiahs before Jesus and after Jesus, and they typically were military men. About 20 years before Jesus was executed, so Jesus was probably around 10 years old, give or take, there was another Jewish fellow who claimed to be the Messiah. He was called Judas the Galilean. Interesting, another Messiah, if you will, from Galilee. And he actually led a rebellion against Rome. No one knows what happened to him in history. He was defeated. No one knows personally what happened to Judas the Galilean. But his 2 adult sons were captured by the Romans. They were crucified because that was the standard punishment for insurrectionists. In Roman law, there were very few people, very few classes of people who were crucified. A common murderer would not be crucified. Citizens of Rome could not be crucified except deserters from the Roman army or insurrectionists. What's the common thread? Deserters from the Roman army and insurrectionists both pose a great threat to Rome, and so they were crucified. Crucifixion was nothing less than state-sponsored terrorism. Mess with Rome, and this is what will happen to you. And so, when Jesus is ultimately brought before Pilate, Pilate ends up, whether willingly or otherwise, crucifying him. And on his cross, which is what the Romans did, they always put the crime of the victim. It was put the King of the Jews. That's significant because in Judaism, that's how the Messiah is referred to as, King Messiah. And so that was the crime of Jesus. He or others or a combination of both thought that he was King Messiah. And so he suffered the ultimate Roman punishment for claiming to be a messianic king who would lead the Jews in rebellion. And let me just say one last thing. Pilate's worst fear was that rebellion would break out. And in the year 66, zealots, Jewish partisans, who thought that they can actually hasten the coming of the Messiah by starting a war, started a war. Because they thought if we have a war with Rome, then the Messiah would have to come. So this Messiah stuff with the Jews is not just something that was of passing interest. This actually started a war. And then in the year 132, yet someone else came along, and he said he's the Messiah, and many Jews believed him. It was Simon Bar Kokhba. Simon Bar Kokhba started a war with Rome. It was full-scale war in the year 132. It lasted 3 years. And Simon Bar Kokhba actually defeated the Romans in several initial battles, decimating several of their legions, which was unheard of. And so more and more Jews came to believe maybe Simon Bar Kokhba is actually the Messiah. Well, as it turned out, Simon Bar Kokhba was not the Messiah. and ultimately Simon Bar Kokhba's armies were destroyed by the Romans, and it was an utter disaster for the Jews because at least 500,000 Jews were killed, and most of the Jews were exiled. It was an utter disaster. And here's some history for you. The Romans were so fed up with Jewish rebellions in Judea that they changed the name. They changed the name from Judea to Palestine, from the land of the Jews to the land of the Philistines. And so now you know a little history of how now it's called Palestine. It was from the last disastrous war that the Jews fought against the Romans. All right. Dean Mena is telling me. 1 minute, so I'll take one real quick question. Yes, please.
Why did Caius send him to Pilate if he was Pilate was Roman?
Oh boy. The question is, why would Caiaphas, the high priest, a Jew, send a fellow Jew, Jesus, to the Roman Pontius Pilate? And that's a question we could spend hours on because there is actually a provision in Jewish law that prohibits exactly that. In Jewish law, a Jewish tribunal cannot hand over another Jew to a Gentile tribunal, and even to this day, once in a while, you will have an American Jew, it happens once in a while, who commits a crime, goes to Israel under the law of return. Every Jew has a right to return to Israel. And then the United States seeks extradition of this person back to America for trial. And it raises a lot of the issues, but modernly Jewish authorities in Israel say not a problem because that was only a law in ancient times when Gentiles didn't treat Jews well. That's not an issue today in America. So if you have other questions, I can take one more question. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Were there any components to Jewish law where the authors risked punishment in rewriting Jewish law so that it fits a certain narrative? My question is there any punishment components of Jewish law risked in writing?
Question is there any punishment in Jewish law for writing something that doesn't toe the party line? And the answer to that is no, because Judaism and Jewish law is very unusual in that debate and disagreement is part of the culture, if not the religion. And that there's a historical basis for that. But in short, if I can summarize and add and end on some whimsical note, the old story is you put 12 Jews in a room and you get 15 different opinions. And because that's just the nature of Judaism, debate, debate, debate. It has been my pleasure to give you this presentation, and I shall now turn this over to Dean Mena. Thank you very much. Thank you.